Is this that helpful, actually, to have Cheneys running around with Kamala 2 weeks out from the election? What do you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the problem is we don't have enough Liz Cheneys. Look, the failure of so many traditionally Democratic constituencies to stand with the Democratic nominee is why we need more and more Republicans to come over and fill in the gap. And Liz Cheney is doing that.
We are back with Will Saletan. It has been so long that he's Dark Will Saletan now. And instead of handing out ponies, he hands out dragons. He's got the beard. He's got the black shirt. And I don't know. Have you gone to the dark side completely, Will?
Yeah, you got the black shirt too, buddy.
I do.
I can't be the pony guy today. So I'm more the glue guy. But that's okay. That's okay because that way I can have the pleasant surprise of being. If you're a pessimist, then when things turn out okay, you're like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, life's all about low expectations. All right, before we get down to business, I have a quick pop quiz for you. What nations does Moldova border?
Well, Ukraine's one of them, right? So what the heck? Slovenia, Croatia, what's in there?
1 for 2, 1 for 3. Actually, it borders Ukraine and Romania. Bill Kristol said it bordered Russia yesterday, and that piqued a little eyebrow raise for me. I was like, I don't think that's right, but like maybe Russia loops around, and we're going to give Bill the benefit of the doubt because if Donald Trump becomes president, Moldova certainly will border Russia. So that's just a quick fact check from yesterday's podcast. In case you have a geography beat coming up, I want to start with the person who used to sit in this chair, Charlie Sykes, was with Liz Cheney in Wisconsin yesterday, and they had there was a series of town halls. Obviously, as we discussed yesterday, Sarah Longwell moderated the one in Pennsylvania, Charlie Sykes in Wisconsin, Maria Shriver, weirdly, in Michigan. I'm not really sure how she fit into that.
She knows Kamala, old Kamala friend. So yeah,
old friend of Kamala. Okay,
yeah.
I want to play a clip from the Charlie event. It's a little bit long, but I think it's worth listening to his full question and Liz's very fulsome answer. So let's take a listen.
Congresswoman Cheney, you know how hard this is, though. You know how hard it is to break away from tribal loyalty, to do something you haven't done before. So I'd like you to address that as well. Lindsey Graham was on television yesterday saying, what are you, never Trump Republicans, what are you thinking of? How could you possibly do all of this? There are a lot of people who are listening to us who may be disillusioned with what's happening with the Republican Party, but they're afraid of paying the price because there is a cost to all of that. So what do you say to those Americans?
Well, don't listen to Lindsey Graham, number one. It's good life advice, actually. But what I say is that what undergirds everything that we are as a nation, everything that we are as a nation is the rule of law, and it's our Constitution. And when you look at what Donald Trump did after the last election, when you look at the cruelty that's involved in someone who watches an attack on the United States Capitol, an attack conducted by people in his name, and refuses for over 3 hours to tell the mob to leave. I mean, people just need to think about what that's depravity. He watched the attack happen, and people kept asking him, please tell the people to leave. And law enforcement officers were being brutally beaten, and the Capitol was being assaulted, and he would not tell people to leave for over 3 hours. That cruelty is the same cruelty that we see when he lies about the federal government's disaster response, when he puts people's lives at risk because he won't tell the truth. He's a man who's unfit to be the president of this good and honorable and great nation. And so I've spent a lot of time working before I was elected to Congress in countries around the world that weren't free, or where people were trying to achieve their freedom. And I know how fragile this can be, how fragile democracy can be. And so in this election, we have a choice. We have the choice of somebody in Vice President Harris who you know is going to uphold the rule of law. You know that she's going to lead this country with a sincere heart. You know that she is going to always be thinking about what is best for this nation. We might not agree on every issue, but but she is somebody that you can trust and someone that our children can look up to. And I think it's so important for us to cast the vote for Vice President Harris this time around.
All right, Will. So she takes a shot at your old buddy Lindsey Graham there, and makes the case really on the issue of democracy. And so I know you watched all three events yesterday, but I was interested in what you made of Liz's answer for what the argument is, why somebody like her should be voting for Kamala, and what you made of the day. I'll put together.
Well, let me start with her answer to this question. Yeah. So Liz Cheney versus Lindsey Graham is a very good distillation of what happened in the Republican Party. We found out that the Republican Party is a large animal kingdom of which there are some vertebrates and some invertebrates. It turned out that the vertebrates were like less than 5% of the party. Okay. And that was, so what you're seeing in the Liz Cheney tour is a representative of the small section of vertebrates. And we're trying to get enough of them to form with the Democrats, enough of a coalition to beat Trump, right? So she split from Lindsey Graham, who is an invertebrate and a representative of those people. And what they split on is a couple of things, and she talks about them in that answer. One of them is character, right? Lindsey Graham decided that he was going to ignore Donald Trump's awful character, and just when he criticizes Trump, he would say, well, this went too far, that went too far. But classic example after January 6th. Well, I think it was kind of, overboard to try to, have this attack on the Capitol. And and Lindsey Graham voted to certify the election. Let's give him credit there. But then he decides to bring Donald Trump back to power, which is, we're going to set aside the fact that Trump perpetually does this. Liz Cheney says, no, character is fundamental. When you see somebody do something depraved, she uses the word depravity there, right? Trump is a depraved person. He's going to keep doing those things. And then she brings up disaster aid as an example, but there's lots of other things. So she decided character mattered. Lindsey decided that it didn't. The other thing was the way she talks about.
There's a little book actually called Character is Destiny that was written by one of Lindsey's friends, John McCain. I guess the message, the subtle title didn't sink in for him.
Right. And Tim, think about it. McCain, Romney, even Paul Ryan, people who actually decided character mattered are the ones who turned against Trump. The other thing is the way she talks there about other countries. I've seen this happen in other countries. These are hawks, right? Lindsey and Liz Cheney are people who said, we believe in democracy. We believe in democracy abroad, standing up to autocracy. But Lindsey Graham decided there was an American exception, that when it comes here and we have an autocrat in our own country, an authoritarian demagogue, that's fine. We Republicans are going to cut a deal with him. And Liz Cheney decided, no, it's the same thing that happened in other countries, and I'm not going to let it happen here. So those are two fundamental differences between the Cheney and Graham models. And I think that's a very good argument for why people like Liz Cheney, who believe in character, believe in a strong foreign policy, and believe in democracy, would turn against Trump, where Graham didn't.
Yeah, the character thing is an obvious argument that I guess just people are so sick of Trump, nobody makes anymore, like 9 years in. And so it gets made, but it's sort of always like as an ancillary point, it feels like. But in some ways, to me, it's like, if you're making the case about the risk of Trump, the character argument is almost a little bit more tangible than the democracy argument, because it's like, we aren't really sure. Like, maybe he'll go home in 4 years, right? Like, you don't know, right? But like, what we do know is that his character is so low that he will do something or some series of things that endanger the country, and that as he ages into his 80s, and as the people around him become more pliant, the risk of that seems even higher. But for some reason, I feel like that's just a hard argument to get to sink in with people.
Yeah, people tend to focus on their pocketbooks. They focus on results. Results is not character, right? Results is, well, he makes the trains run on time. Yeah. And so it's elites. It's people who understand, focus on the person. There is a constituency of voters who do talk about character and just say, look, I don't like the guy. The problem is you have this chorus of Republicans in the invertebrate elite who call it mean tweets, right? They just say, well, that's a little outburst here and there, but fundamentally we agree with him. So I think that's the fundamental divide.
Steph, I wonder, since most of the people on this podcast are Cheney admirers at some level or another, because I'm no Sonny Bunch. I don't have like a Dick Cheney picture above my bed or anything, but I've voted for a couple Cheneys in my life. That was not you. And so I'm wondering what you think about the critique that you hear in some left quarters that it's like, is this that helpful actually to have Cheney's running around with Kamala 2 weeks out from the election? What do you say to that critique?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the problem is we don't have enough Liz Cheneys. Look, the failure of so many traditionally Democratic constituencies to stand with the Democratic nominee is why we need more and more Republicans to come over and fill in the gap. And Liz Cheney is doing that. You know, for God's sake, that outreach is to an audience that will matter in this election. What she's drawing, Tim, isn't this one of the few places where Kamala's doing better than Biden? Like she's drawing like 9% of Republicans in some of these polls. That number has gone up as the support from like Latinos, like lots of Democratic constituencies, has got white working class has gone down, right? And so the Republicans are filling in. I just wish there were more Liz Cheneys doing these events. Can I say one other thing about gender here? She's at these events. Here's Liz Cheney sitting next to her. Meanwhile, Kamala's talking about, Mark Esper and John Bolton and, these, John Kelly. Like, here are all these men who worked for Trump, who Kamala has to say that they're against Trump. And, good for them that they've come out. Yeah. But where are they? They're not showing the courage that this woman is showing. This is a whole thing. This was like a lot of women standing up where a lot of men are not.
Yeah. That's just what I was talking to Mitch Landrieu about. That's what I talk to everybody about. I talk to strangers about this at the coffee shop. I'm like, where is Mark Esper? I'm just like lashing out at the French truck. But we do have Charlie and Sarah. So good on them, our pals. Sarah Long, she was marvelous yesterday in Pennsylvania. It was good to see Charlie stepping up in Wisconsin where he has a real name ID, where people know him, having been on radio. No squish like you and me, has a reputation of being a good actual conservative. So good on Charlie. All right, you've been watching a lot of the Trump rallies, and wrote an article for us yesterday. It was really strong. That kind of just tried to simplify. Like, we throw around these terms, autocratic, fascistic, and you just tried to lay out in a list, like, what exactly are we talking about when we talk about Trump's plans to run a fascist government? And so why don't you just walk through what you've been noticing in the Trump rallies and kind of what encompasses, that list of fascistic tendencies?
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody wants to watch all these Trump rallies. I did, nobody. But the thing is, he will say things here and there, which, if you put it together, are a fascist agenda, which coincide with things that he says all the time. He talks a lot, for example, about jailing his opponents, and he will just go off and name people like, Hillary, Chuck Schumer. He'll say people shouldn't be allowed to run for office. He'll say this or that network's license should be revoked because he doesn't like the way that they edited an interview or what they broadcast. And he talks a lot, Tim, about violence. He talks to his supporters. He encourages that. He talks about unleashing the police, unleashing the military. The most recent one, for example, was the stuff about the enemy within. I mean, if you track what Trump has said about the enemy within, number one, it includes people like Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi. I mean, Trump just repeated that on Fox, right? And number two, he says, if these people get a little uppity, we might need to call out the National Guard, call out the military. And you would think that this is just hype, except for the fact that he did on January 6th send a mob to the Capitol. He did clear Lafayette Square. He, did talk about sending in the National Guard to states and cities whether or not they want it. So he's got a track record to back up the fascistic rhetoric.
He does. And I think the other thing that I observed that maybe some people it hasn't sunk in with some people, but you're watching the speeches, is like, even when he's talking about policy, like the difference between 2016 and now to me is like the policy segments of the speech, if you go back and watch them in 2016, well, like they were Trumpy, right? So they were not, he didn't sound like Mitt Romney, right? With the way he talked about building the wall and draining the swamp, but he was kind of on message. Like, he had a specific policy agenda that he told people that he was going to enact. It also included jailing Hillary. So there were some fascistic elements then too, right? But like alongside that stuff was that's not happening now. I like the only policy things that he brings up when I'm watching him are the across the board tariffs, which is authoritarian in its own right, because he often mentions he doesn't want to deal with Congress on that. The mass deportations, I guess we're being generous, the liquid gold, right? We're gonna drill more, right? But like besides that, like it's nothing. It's all vengeance, grievance, authoritarian plans, right? Am I missing anything?
Yeah, so here's where I have a problem. So I agree with you that that's what's happening. He's kind of evacuated the policy agenda. The energy thing, he claims that migrants and energy explain everything, right? Migrants are the reason why Social Security is blah, blah, blah. Energy, if he's going to drill more, he's going to somehow increase beyond what the private sector would want to do. I don't know how he would do that, but that's going to drive down prices. So he's got these magic keys that he claims will solve everything else, which 13? Is just bullshit.
Or just 2.
He's 11 short of Alan Lichtman. So there is a little bit of an agenda, but by and large, Tim, I agree with you that he's way more scattered, meandering than he was before, the Arnold Palmer thing being the latest example. Here's my problem, Tim. I agree with you about all that, but I feel like we're in an oncology situation where I'm looking at the numbers at the polls and I'm like, the patient is doing everything right. The doctors are doing everything right. The numbers should be moving in the right direction, and they're not.
Cancer spread.
And that scares the hell out of me. That absolutely scares the hell out of me, like people have made up their mind. So I'm trying to understand why they haven't moved. And the fact that everything should be going in the right direction and it isn't makes me way more worried than I would be if a couple of things were going wrong.
Yeah. Can we go even deeper into the worry for a second, since we've got Dark Will with us today? We're just going to do one question on this because, you don't want to spend too much time. Let's just say that those worries are well-founded and that Trump does squeak this thing out. Having just written the fascism article, having watched all these speeches, like where are you on like the alarm scale? Like what do you think, it would look like?
Well, I am alarmed. I'm actually less alarmed because, look, I agree with your diagnosis of Trump that he's become more scattered. That's in some ways a good thing in terms of how much of a threat he poses. Because authoritarians who have done a lot of damage are very focused. Putin's a very focused guy. If you want to go back to the fascists of the 20th century, very focused people. Trump's not, and Trump's more
Gaddafi, not that focused. Still created a lot of problems, though. For Libya.
True.
Yeah.
True. What worries me more, Tim, is we have seen the Republican elite exposed as a bunch of invertebrates. So I can't name to you, Tim, things that Lindsey Graham or Mike Johnson or any of these other, I can't name what they're going to stand up to. They've pretty much folded on everything. So if Trump decides to do something, let's take the most obvious example. This is not a specifically authoritarian thing. You brought up the tariffs. Yeah. What is most likely to happen in a Trump administration? Trump says, I'm not a warmonger. We didn't start any wars when I was president. He will start a trade war, a massive global trade war, right? He's going to do his tariffs. There's going to be and Americans are going to be like, holy cow. Like all of a sudden, everybody's hitting us back with tariffs. Everything costs way more than it did. Are Republicans going to stand in the way of that? Can they? That's the president who can do tariffs, right? So that's a very realistic thing that will happen.
Yeah, and with the deportations, let's go to immigration, for example. There was a quote from Trump's speech yesterday in Greenville that I want to play, where he is talking about the Harris campaign ads that are and her rhetoric that is correctly blaming him for killing the bipartisan immigration bill. Let's listen to that.
And so they tightened it up a little bit. Oh, look, our numbers are a little bit better. Look, Trump stopped the bill. He told the Senate, Ted, did I ever tell you not to sign that bill? No, right? I didn't tell anybody to, but they like that. Trump stopped. I sort of liked it. It gives you such power. You come from Queens, and now I'm calling for you will not sign that bill, senators. You will not. They have me calling up, you will not sign that bill. Actually, I like that sort of. Maybe I should go along with that story, Ted. That's something, nobody's had that kind of power in a long time, right?
Classic on the fascism scale there. Like he knows it's politically harmful for him to be credited for killing the bill, but like he can't help himself but brag about it anyway, because like just that allure of being all powerful.
Right. right? And I actually take some consolation from the specific way in which Trump talks about this, because, again, not to dispute your Gaddafi example, but but the authoritarians who have done
the
the
Gaddafi
most
example spoke to your point. I mean, like a lot of problems in Libya, but I mean, broad, it was contained.
right. I mean, if we take sort of the classic example of Hitler wasn't just in it for the ego. Hitler wanted to do things. Trump is in it for the ego, and you can hear him talking about that. He loves the power because of how it reflects on him. He likes to feel powerful, and so I don't think Trump is likely to do the kind of damage that the authoritarians of the 20th century did. The more likely course is what Kamala and Liz Cheney were talking about, which is that because Trump likes the feeling of power and ego, he's easily manipulated by the guys overseas who really are into doing something like Putin. I'd like to take over Europe, right? He knows how to manipulate Trump's ego. Kim Jong-un knows how to manipulate Trump's ego. Xi Jinping. These guys are all going to manipulate Trump's ego. And because Trump has no values, he's as happy to be manipulated by our enemies as he would be by our allies.
Yeah, one more thing on the immigration topic. Something that flummoxes me, because I think maybe usually like I can put my political strategist brain on and be pretty rational about what I think the right approach is. But like the immigration stuff makes me so mad. I was always such a squish on immigration back when compassionate conservatives were a thing. That I feel like I might be clouded on this. But like Cuban was doing the rounds. He continues to do the rounds. Him and Liz Cheney. If we get out of this, are the heroes of the cycle. On I think this was on CNBC or some more conservative outlet. And he was like, I talked to small business owners in Texas, and I asked them, how's it going to look for your restaurant or your your retail store if Stephen Miller's thugs come to the door and say, hey, I want to see everybody's papers, right? Like, how's that going to look? I'm like, the answers I get are in Texas is a lot of, we don't want to do that. Like I don't know that would be actually good for my business. And so he was making kind of a pro economy argument for immigration. And, I've been arguing that the Democrats should make more, like in the Hispanic community, obviously they're losing ground, has like it sunk in that, this little fascist from Santa Monica is going to be sending jackbooted thugs into the quinceañera. And some people are going to get around, some bad guys are going to get sent back, but other people, there's going to be some ancillary damage. The other side of that argument is like Matt Iglesias is like Democrats should never talk about immigration. They should always talk about health care, and since that's a winner. And I don't know, maybe that's right. But I just, when I hear him talking about this immigration stuff, it's like there's a lot of vulnerabilities that I don't feel like are being exploited because I don't know that people can want to go there in their heads. I don't know. What do you think?
So Tim, you've brought up a couple of different threads there. I mean, that are woven together. But let me separate them for a minute. So one is your point about the economy. The economy needs labor, right? We have labor shortages. People can see it all over the place, and so immigrants are supplying that. And so that there's a macro point there. But there's also, you've brought up the implementation. What does it look like to send in the deportation police, right? And the analogy that comes to mind when you're talking about that for me is abortion, right? Like here's all these people who said, like, we think, we don't like abortion. Let's restrict abortion. And then we start to see states doing it and we see the results of it. What is it like when the government goes in and sues for your medical records? What is it like when they tell the doctors that, they're in legal danger if they help you end this pregnancy that's gone wrong? And all of a sudden, a lot of people who are pro-life are like, holy shit, that's not what I wanted, right? So it may be, sadly, that we have to see the deportations similarly before people who believe in deportations go like, well, that is not what I wanted. I did not want to see these kids dragged out of this house. But that's just what's going to happen if Stephen Miller gets his way.
That's a good and depressing analogy. I'm glad I asked you about that. Okay, before we lose you, I want to talk a little bit about Elon. Some legal issues. He's given away, he's got $1 million lottery, but you have to register to vote, to be eligible, and that might be illegal, but we don't really have a federal election commission, so who knows if that's enforceable. He's also running these ads, and it's two separate ads. I want to play them back to back. One is being run targeting Muslim communities in Michigan. The The other one is being run targeted Jewish communities in Pennsylvania. Let's see if you can guess which one is which.
Vice President Harris has chosen a side, her right side. Harris has made herself clear. She stands with Israel and the Jewish people.
And joining Kamala will be her husband and top advisor, Doug Emhoff, who would be the first Jewish presidential spouse ever.
Kamala relies on her husband, Doug, for counsel on the toughest issues, like Israel's noble fight against the radical terrorists in Gaza. And when Doug talks, Kamala listens. Kamala and Doug, America's pro-Israel power couple.
Love that.
Two-faced Kamala Harris is secretly campaigning for Palestine and trying to get away with it.
In Jewish communities throughout America, questions are being asked. Why is she running ads pandering to Palestine? We must stand up to anti-Semitism. We say no more.
Kamala Harris, stop pandering to Palestine and stand with our ally Israel.
Nice music there. Yeah, so that's the same pack. Don't know if you caught that. Same group running both ads. The one that focuses on Doug, the first Jewish first gentleman, potentially, was targeting not Jewish community, but the Muslim community, hoping to, I guess, banking on the fact that those voters' anti-Semitism will be influenced by learning about Doug.
Wow. Okay. This is, to me, easily one of the most despicable things that's happened in this campaign. I'd like to believe that Jews and Arabs can agree that we may have lots of disputes about land and like the stuff that's very serious and lots of people getting killed, but that we both can agree that we don't like being lied to, and that's clearly what's happening here. We're being told two different messages by the same people that can't both be true. So I'm glad that the fact that this is being aired by the same organization is being made public so that everybody can understand that we're being manipulated. The other thing, Tim, that ad about Doug Emhoff, the one that she has a Jewish spouse, that is the most overtly anti-Semitic thing I have seen outside of like Nick Fuentes and like the wingers, right? This is coming from the Elon pack.
Yeah.
That doesn't say he's pro-Israel. It says he's Jewish.
Yes.
And therefore you can't trust him. That is overt anti-Semitism coming from Elon Musk and his people. We should be talking way, way more about that. Overt bigotry.
I agree. And there are, I think, conservative Jewish voters that are anti-Trump that are part of this small percentage of voters that are still swing voters. If they're more focused on Israel's security. And, I think that you hear from these folks all the time. It was that guy I got into a fight with on MSNBC the one time who was blaming Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for the campus protesters, which I didn't think made a lot of sense since the campus protesters were calling him Genocide Joe at the time, but didn't seem like they were big allies. But I needless to say, like, those people exist and they're out there. And I think communicating just about how debased and how overt the anti-Semitism is coming from Elon, who's Trump's like number one ally at this point, is pretty remarkable. So I don't know. Any other thoughts about that, or Elon's malign influence on the campaign generally? Before I lose you,
Elon may be like Trump in the sense that he's evil but also stupid, and the stupid may overcome. There's my pony for us. Okay, the stupid may overcome the evil. For example, Elon he's doing these ads. It's the most clumsy thing to put out these two messages in a way that you and I can just play for people, right? The other thing is Elon's trying to handle so much of Trump's get out the vote. And Tim, my secret prayer, my pony is I am hoping that Elon has done and will do for Trump's get out the vote what Elon did to Twitter. Elon's a moron. I mean, he's a genius at some things, but he's a moron in many ways. He's kind of a moron at people. Good, smart at things, dumb at people. We've all seen this before. I would like to hope that Elon has set things up so that when the numbers start coming in on election night, we find out that the get out the vote operation was a disaster. And eventually we have all the stories about how Elon screwed it up. Inshallah.
Inshallah. The Trump GOTV is akin to my Twitter mentions. If only. That'd be great. We should also just mention, it's all that other ad was Islamophobic. We got so focused on how anti-Semitic the Doug ad was, like the music, like, AI, generic Arab music, and the whole thing. It's just so hackneyed. It's so pathetic. Anyway, Will Saletan, it had been too long. We'll be bringing you back again soon. And keep an eye out for Will's YouTube videos. I'm doing the quick takes, all right? The hot takes. Will has been putting together these awesome like longer videos that deep dive into an issue. The latest one is kind of what we were talking about earlier on the fascism topic, but there's a lot more there. So go check that out on YouTube. We'll be talking to you soon. Everybody else, we'll be back here tomorrow for another edition of the Bulwark Podcast. See y'all then. Peace.